Hey guys, welcome back to the Buzz Weaver channel, this late night breaking news segment, because we have been talking about how as we get closer to Biden's projected 70% vaccination number he wants to reach, we are seeing the government take more and more actions to essentially bully, peer pressure, and if necessary, shame Americans into compliance. A lot of the times, and or a lot of the reasons why some people kind of just sit back with an attitude of, well, if it's not actually happening to me directly, I'm not particularly worried about it. If it's not on my doorstep, I'm not going to worry about it. And we already know, and I can already see from the numbers here and the videos here on the channel, that people are just absolutely fatigued from the political overload, because that's where we are. We're not currently in a political period. This is usually when people are recovering from all of what we experience when we see elections and so forth. But, of course, this is concerning because here we are, and I can actually show you the things that we have talked about over the years when it comes to the willingness of the government to push its weight to see if people are willing to push back. And this was one of those. Today, this post from the Hill, the CDC, saying unvaccinated people shouldn't travel over Labor Day. And that's really amazing. Look at this response from Jen here. Unvaccinated people shouldn't be traveling in general. And I said, they aren't traveling in Australia, but we're in the United States. We still have the Constitution and Bill of Rights. I see the left has quickly adopted authoritarianism even after 4 years of feigning oppression under President Trump. So these same people that were all upset because Orange Man bad, his personality, his disposition, his brassness, his tweets were mean on Twitter, and yet the Taliban, Black Bloc, BLM, and Antifa are still just tweeting away daily. Unvaccinated people shouldn't travel over Labor Day, CDC. Well, apparently the CDC isn't aware that we are a constitutional republic. Ahead of Labor Day weekend, the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, that's here in Atlanta, is preemptively recommending that travelers stay home amid the continued Delta outbreaks. Okay, I'm okay with that. I am okay with the CDC making suggestions. Perfectly fine with that. Where I draw my line is when there's these perceived mandates. You know, this idea that if you don't do it, there's consequences. Well, what consequences are those? Who's enforcing it? Who's going to issue the citations? Who's gonna arrest someone for not wearing a mask or for not being vaccinated? I can't imagine in the United States any coherent, capable, sober judge anywhere in our courts that would actually entertain the idea that an American citizen would be denied the ability to exercise their freedoms and liberties. And that's what they're just banking on. The government and the left and Democrats and politicians in general bank on people's ignorance of their rights and the law, and it's really sad. And it's terrible that people aren't learning, or children aren't learning civics in school where they can understand how this works. Now, I want to take a moment and play this for you right here.
Emily Palmer. I don't know if they're still here, so go ahead, sir.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brandon Burns. I'm prior United States Army. I'm a businessman. I'm a well-known member in this community. I'm also the creator of Las Vegas Freedom of Choice Facebook page, and more importantly, I'm a father. I have a daughter in high school here. I also have a daughter in elementary school here. There's been a lot of talk of segregation here tonight and racism, but we have another segregation right now. No matter how you look at it, at its core, segregation is wrong against blacks and whites, gays and straights, males and females, Democrats, Republicans. We have a new segregation in this country right now. It's masked, unmasked, and vaccinated and unvaccinated. And at its core, this is wrong. We all should have a personal freedom of life choice. Masks are okay. Masks not being worn are okay. Having a vaccine is absolutely okay, and choosing not to have a vaccine is absolutely okay. None of us should be told what to do with our bodies. And I'm calling on all teachers, all Clark County School District employees, healthcare workers, law enforcement officers, September 7th, call off work. We are going to shut this country down. You are the majority. You are not alone. They are already 700 teachers behind. They cannot do it without you, and they know it, and we will stand together. We are growing, and we will have our voices heard. We will not be mandated. Per the Nevada Revised Statute 39.
All right, I think you guys understand here. This is it. This is the government's push to see how far they can go and what sort of resistance they're going to get. It's the slow boil. It's the process of slowly introducing these things, using clever language, using clever words, throwing it out there and saying, well, we're not really going to actually implement it, or we're not actually going to enforce it, but they throw it out there to kind of basically to desensitize you, to adapt you to it. So it's very slow. It's not, they don't abruptly come out and say, we're going to start enforcing this. Now, we saw that with de Blasio in New York. Now, he's being sued because there are people who can't be vaccinated. Now, throughout the day, I've been keeping up with what Greg has been posting here from the AJC. That's the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, where you guys are not from the Atlanta area. And I find it interesting because this is like the fourth post he's had with Dr. Tomey here. And in this one, it says, public health officials are getting booed in places. They're getting harassed when this should be a time to come together, said Carlos Del Rio from Emory University. He's a medical doctor there. Great, prestigious university here in Atlanta. As a Apple specialist, I spent a lot of time there at Emory, repairing their units, and their IT people and everybody are wonderful at Emory. The people there at Emory are wonderful. The university is great. The medical facility is outstanding. But nonetheless, Greg here has been posting throughout the day, and I have replied to several of these because it started off rather divisively, where Tomey was suggesting that people were shutting down some of the facilities or vaccination stations or others, and I never saw any images of it. I asked them for it. I said, where are the images? Where are the people that are allegedly doing this? Now, I can understand that people get into raid brigades. We see that all the time on Twitter. And raid brigades is where people get together and put people on blast. When you put someone on blast, you basically get a group of people together to go after the person, and you ratio them. What that means is you go after them by making comments that are higher than the amount of likes, to ratio it to suggest that people are complaining more than they are liking something. And so what happens is, or what they're suggesting in some of the previous posts, was that, or Tomey is suggesting that there's ratioing going on. In other words, these nurses and doctors and facilities and so forth are getting like harassing emails or harassing phone calls, but mostly she said emails. But the way Greg was trying to make it out was like there was, these pitchfork and torch carrying people going to these facilities and, keeping people from being able to be vaccinated, which is not true. But he's a journalist, so he doesn't have to be honest, because journalists don't have to answer anybody. There is no body, there's no authority that they have to answer to. So they can write whatever they want, or they can conveniently put opinion in their article and then say whatever they want. And what's curious is, now I don't know if you're a big fan of Krispy Kreme or any of these other restaurants that this Indiana woman is talking about, but not to totally dismiss the article, I just thought it was interesting that here in this section, moreover, the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology has urged asthma patients to wear a mask, despite fears it may impair their ability to breathe, and to talk to their asthma or allergy specialists about their options. So here we have the medical community totally on board with these sorts of mandates, with this sort of peer pressure, with this kind of heavy-handedness, because they're trying to play on people's fear. They're trying to, here's the thing. I've said this quite often. If you're a member of the channel or a subscriber to the channel, you know that the Democrats are going to play off people's fears. They're not going to let a crisis go to waste. They certainly didn't do it in the election of 2020 when they were making rule changes. And then, of course, when the pandemic came along, that was such an extraordinary stroke of luck for them that they took advantage of that even more. And so they are, of course, trying to get those get their bills passed to make sure that those particular measures are still in place for the next election. But we're not anticipating there being another pandemic, so those sorts of rules aren't going to apply. But that's not going to stop them from trying. So they're pushing, and they're pushing. But there's so much that they're not saying. And we know from these discussions that part of the intimidation, part of the bullying, is to suggest that if you don't agree with masks, or if you don't agree with vaccines, or you're not part of the group collective when it comes to the greater good, which is directly from socialism. The greater good is basically how they operate, basing everything on the fact that it isn't about the individual, it is about the community or the mind, or the hive mind. And so we look here. Now this is from Carnegie Mellon, a very reputable university here in the United States, very much like Emory. And you can see here the largest decrease in hesitancy between January and May by education group was in those with a high school education or less. So hesitancy held constant in the most educated group, those with a PhD. By May, PhDs were the most hesitant group, while vaccine hesitancy decreased across virtually all racial groups. Black people and Pacific Islanders had the largest decrease, joining Hispanics and Asians having lower vaccine hesitancy than white people in May. I actually had someone on my Facebook say, oh, those people with the PhDs that are probably against it are probably more in the theology and philosophy. So in other words, those with PhDs in obviously religion. So this is just, the absurdity of argument is ridiculous. So here you have it. There is hesitancy among the educated group, those with a PhD. So this elementary schoolyard nonsense of you're dumb, because you don't wear a mask or you're not getting vaccinated is just ridiculous. Also from Wisconsin Public Radio, because there's always these wannabe sidewalk attorneys. For some reason, I couldn't get the highlighter to work on this, but here's the section right here. So from the radio station, now let's look at the governance or the government itself. I can barely see this. So let's look at the government itself. To what extent can the government mandate vaccines? So this individual they have on the radio show says, well, this is such an important point. Let's make a critical distinction. Can government forcibly require you to get vaccinated in the U.S.? The reality is, legally, no. You can't be forced to take a vaccine. You're not going to be physically restrained and given a vaccine by any legitimate public health authority in the U.S. at the federal, state, tribal, and local levels. Interesting they mentioned the word tribal. And again, so from the CLS Blue Sky blog, which is, I think is a group of attorneys out of Columbia Law School, you see it right here as well, So what the Constitution directs about mask mandates. The Constitution contains no language concerning mask. For this reason, the Constitution can't make mask wearing constitutional. Instead, the Constitution makes mask wearing not unconstitutional on the following textual basis. So I'm not going to get into all the legalese, but when I present this information to individuals like Jen over here, they scuff and they huff and they puff, and they actually said, I have people actually tell me that they didn't care about the facts. They literally told me they didn't care about the facts. They simply wanted to impose their will onto their fellow Americans because either they're terrified of getting COVID. Now, I understand. Now, I'm not insensitive, nor do I deny that COVID is an issue. It can be a problem, and people I know that have had it, family members that have had it. My mother's best friend actually passed away from complications from COVID. So this isn't me being, insensitive to the fact that people get COVID. What I do find interesting is the people that practice the most stringent forms of protection from COVID apparently are the ones who seem to get it the most. So I don't know if this is part of the exaggerated hysteria like we see over here with Greg, where these individuals talk about it so much and they just, nearly at a fantasy level preoccupation with it that the slightest cold, the slightest cough, the slightest whatever is simply going to be considered COVID. I mean, both of my parents have had both of their injections. They've had colds since they've been injected, but they didn't get COVID, thankfully, because they're seniors, and of course they're in that high risk group. But nonetheless, I've not spoke to my doctor about the vaccine. I'm not particularly pursuing the vaccine. I work for myself, so I'm not going to require myself to have a vaccine or have a negative test. Now, this weekend, you guys may know, if you follow my channel, I oftentimes cover Dragon Con, which is a major convention, sci-fi convention, comic book sci-fi convention here in Atlanta. It is gigantic. I mean, this year they're probably anticipating upwards of 70. Well, typically when I went several years ago, there was as many as 70,000 people. So it is gigantic. It is huge. And the parade can have up to 82,000 people there at the parade that also happens at Dragon Con. So people are going. I've seen plenty of pictures on Facebook of the fellow Dragon Con attendees and stuff. I've not seen them there yet. They'll probably be arriving like tomorrow, Thursday, and so forth. But, there's going to be probably not I don't know how many people there'll be. I wouldn't imagine there being as much as you would anticipate having at a regular Dragon Con. But I just find it fascinating how Greg here has changed this topic several times. But it is very concerning and a little distressing that people are getting anxious, people are getting worried, people are getting concerned because as we move closer to the date for companies and industries and businesses that are going to require vaccines, we're going to see a lot of people out of work. And right now we're already experiencing levels of food shortages. We're experiencing shortages at restaurants, even where I live in the suburbs here in South Metro Atlanta, where we see signs saying, be patient with the staff, we're understaffed. Or the other day, they actually closed the post office here where I live. They closed it because they didn't have enough people. They had to close the post office until the following day because they didn't have enough people. And all these individuals, like Jen over there, who was saying that people shouldn't be able to travel, and I reminded them that we're in the United States. This is something I could never imagine in our country, much less in Australia. Distressing moment, a little girl sits in her handcuffed father's lap while he pleads with officers after being arrested for not wearing a mask in a park in Sydney's COVID hotspot. This is ridiculous. You want to talk about intellectual capacity? You want to talk about things that are dumb, things that are just ridiculous? This is it right here. Someone exercising their personal liberties in the United States is not someone out intentionally and willfully trying to spread COVID. That was the other thing some of these lunatics on Twitter was trying to suggest, that if you're out there, and you're not wearing a mask and you're not vaccinated, you are intentionally trying to spread it. You're trying to harm people. It's ridiculous. People are out conducting their damn business, their everyday errands. They're out doing what they need to do every single day. They're not thinking about, I wonder how many people I can infect if I go over here. I wonder if I could scare people by coughing and wheezing and hacking. Maybe I'll pass out and start shaking on the ground like I'm having convulsions, and just to see what kind of, attention I can draw to myself. That's absolutely ridiculous. Nonetheless, guys, this was something I wanted to kind of get off my chest because this is just ridiculous. But be prepared. As I showed you some of these legal experts speaking here, that, I really, 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 really doubt, and it's going to be very interesting in New York. I can't even begin to imagine people being issued citations, much less arrested, because I don't know of any court. Now, I worked in law for 5 years. I'm not a legal expert, so don't take legal advice from me. I'm just saying, having been around the court system and having worked for the state, I don't know any judge in this state that would actually enforce this type of mandate. It's not even a law, right? I know, I've heard it. I know people keep saying, oh yeah, but mandates can be legally enforced. You can enforce it. You can issue someone a citation, but as soon as they go to court, it's going to get dropped because we still have the Constitution. We still have our legal rights in this country. Those have not gone away, right? We have not suspended the Constitution because the left is scared of a virus. We don't suspend the Constitution in the Bill of Rights because a group of people have an ideological difference from another group of people. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's the same thing I was just saying a moment ago. How is it that just 4 years ago, these same people felt that they were oppressed? We had Antifa suggesting that we were under a fascist dictatorship, which is absurd. It simply is not happening that way. But the idea, now I can understand it. See, unvaccinated people shouldn't travel over Labor Day. That's great clickbait from the Hill. Because if you read the actual article, the CDC is just simply suggesting it, which is what they need to do responsibly. They need to just say to people, hey, we would recommend or we would suggest or we would encourage. This whole mandate this or whatever else is ridiculous. And this continuing narrative by Greg and or Dr. Tomey about individuals getting harassing emails. Like, I'm a content creator. I can tell you all about being harassed. I can tell you all about being ratioed, particularly from Antifa. I used to get ratioed from Antifa quite a bit. It's extraordinarily annoying. But it happens. And so, I've not seen any video. I've not seen any footage. I've not seen any stills. I've not seen anything that suggests that there was these pitchfork and tiki torch carriers going around keeping people from being vaccinated in Georgia. All right, guys, so I'm going to wrap it up there. If you haven't already, of course, appearing right there on the screen, that would be the channel icon to subscribe to the channel. Of course, you can click on that to obviously subscribe, as well as notifications. And of course, if you're watching this on Alt Tech, I want to thank all you guys for your continued support and follows. And I will see you guys in the next video.